Hey there, it's Jackie. How are you? Okay, so a friend of mine actually passed on last week, and that prompted me to come and have a bit of a chat to you because I want to talk about the lungs. The lungs help us to get in touch with grief, to experience it in its fullness. That's one of the reasons their consciousness is designed to help us do. Now, I'm going to expand into the energetics or the consciousness of grief for the lungs and the respiratory system in this video to kind of take you through a little bit of a journey and give you some insight into perhaps some ways that you can support yourself. Grief is absolutely an inevitable part of this journey. We're all going to take it. All cycles cycle out at some point in time, and that's what we are. We are in a cycle at some point in time. It's going to cycle out, and that's quite natural. And perhaps depending on your relationship with grief, the way it was taught to you, it can actually be one of the hardest parts of this journey, learning how to love and how to let go. Now, I was going to say lose for a second there, but we don't truly ever lose anything because that which we love, we will always have an entanglement to and be connected to through consciousness. It doesn't matter whether that person's alive or whether they've transitioned, there's always a connection there that doesn't go away. We are very much taught and we are given very unhealthy views and beliefs that loss is final and it's hard. And it actually doesn't have to be either. And if we're being brutally honest, it's not designed to be hard either. It's naturally designed to have beautiful flow with it where you get to express the love. From a Chinese medicine perspective, grief, when it is in an unhealthy form and we don't have a great relationship to it, it can get really, really stuck and obstruct the chi energy of the lungs. And the lungs are huge, and the whole body, impairing the function of your lungs. And then what it will do, the grief, when it gets stuck, it consumes your overall vitality and energy, leaving you really zapped and feeling blah. Unhealthy grief also contracts the Wei Qi, which the fields of it, which is the protective Qi aspect around the body. And when we're in deep states of grief, then our immune system can become compromised because of this stagnant process and contraction process that we're taught to do. And it's often said that grief is the pain we feel when we bump up against life's non-negotiable change and loss processes. And you'll often hear me in sessions and classes referring to loss as transition, because the way that I've always experienced it and the way that your innate wisdom has shown me in our sessions together is that grief and death is simply a process of transitioning, or especially death, transitioning from one state of being, one form of sentience, to another state of being and another form of sentience. Now, grief in the lungs come from a Chinese medicine perspective, is associated with one of the five elements, and that's metal element. So metal element, it contracts grief by nature and really encourages us to go deeply within and identify other sources of sadness that we've perhaps been holding on to, and for whatever reason we haven't been able to process it, or we've not been aware that it's still there. That's one of the beautiful things about grief. It allows old grief to come up. So trying to let go prematurely or get over it, or there's another one that comes up for me that I hear a lot from people. It's time that I just was over this and finished with it. Or another one people use is everything happens for a reason. These kinds of thoughts are all ways to really downplay grief. And many times it's absolutely taught to you to do this, more often in very early childhood, especially when we see others around us in the world doing it. We just assume that's the process. So when grief is not fully observed, it has to be witnessed, processed, honored. It will often lead to despair, depression, rigidity, not just within the body, but rigidity in the mind. negativity, and a tendency to want to cling on to the past big time. All right. Now, it's our innate way of being to lean into the experience, allow yourself to feel it fully, and take from the experience, no matter how long it lasts, right? Exactly what that experience has to show you and offer you. Now, quite often, there's lots of learning that is there to be gained that you can take forward with you from that process. Where if you do it properly, you'll integrate it and it becomes very deep wisdom. All right. Now, there is going to be much grief that continues to surface for all of us as these few months and years go on. There is absolutely personal grief being experienced, and also massive amounts of what we call collective grief arising. So, this is grief on the planet that comes up. Many of you actually feel it, but you may not realize that you are tapping into it. It's tapping into you, and you're helping to share the experience of grief collectively right now, so that to a certain degree it does release, all right, and doesn't get contracted in. When we don't lean into the grief experience, it can also lead then to a emotional disassociation. A super common expression of this is called gallows humor. Maybe you've heard of it. And you'll see this in somebody where they laugh really nervously. It'll be like something like that, right? That's my vague attempt. And that'll happen during a pretty serious conversation. And they do this in order to try and deflect away from the massive depths of pain and grief that they subconsciously know, or maybe consciously know, is underneath. So watch out for that. When we can lean into grief and absolutely honor the experience, we are invited in such a beautiful way to fully witness the process of life and the human experience and celebrate the love for that person or that animal, whatever it is. Grief is the potent reminder of the inevitability of death, perhaps of hardship that they've had, and celebrating that loss, that transition. It's not to be fixed because really there's nothing wrong with grief. It's a very natural, wonderful process of love expressing itself. Now, this doesn't mean to say that grief is meant to be easy. It can at times feel pretty hard, but it's important when we lean in to the grief that we're prepared to sit there with it, not try to rush in any direction through it or around it. And depending on the extent of the grief, it's super important to understand that there is no limit whatsoever, or time limit per se, on this. It really does have a life cycle all of its own. And everyone is very uniquely different in that, in life itself, but in that process, it's not going to look the same for everybody. It's not meant to. So don't project your own experience of it onto another person and think that they should be the same way, right? Well, it only took me 6 months to get over that. Why are you still here in 18? That's just the ego speaking, right? Or I didn't cry as much as you. So instead, invite them to lean in with you and know that over time, what happens if you start to honor grief as a teacher rather than something that you have to get over. So let the grief be a teacher for you, right? There is a very special point in the lung meridian called the lung 2 acupuncture point. And there we have lung channels that are run bilaterally through the body. And what this lung 2 point can do is support the lungs during a period of mourning, transition, despair, or even confusion. It doesn't have to be just wholly solely about grief. So this point can help you breathe more freely, providing your spirit, your soul, and the physical body with the space that it needs to be able to integrate and cycle through the process more naturally. So let me show you what that looks like. To locate lung 2 position, what you'll need to do is extend your arm out the front of you. This is the easiest way I've found to do it. And what you'll notice when you do this and you extend it out the front is that your clavicle bone will protrude here. Now, depending on how much padding you have on you at the moment, and I have a bit of padding, it might take a little bit to find where this point is. So you're going to come just above the clavicle there. You'll feel the clavicle bone that runs along there, and then you're just going to come underneath the clavicle. And when you pop underneath it, you're going to locate a bit of a dimple or a hollow point just underneath it. That's lung 2 point. And you can stimulate these very gently. It doesn't have to be hard pressure. And you can do it on both sides. Extend it out and project it a bit. Find that clavicle, run just underneath it. That's your hollow point. Breathe deeply. And just really stimulate it. Let the channel do its job. Let the body do its job. Let the lungs do its job. All right. And lean in. As these experiences come up for you, just lean in. By stimulating this, you might have a little bit of emotion or grief that comes up. Remember, emotion is energy in motion. So tune into your body. What motion do I need to do? How do I need to move through this? And remember, there's no time frame on it, right? So there you go. Hope you found this of some help. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button before you leave. That really, really helps me out. And if you'd like to know when I drop another video, do the little bell button. It lets you know of notifications. You can turn it on or off at any point in time. And if you'd like to check out more, you want to connect with me personally for whatever reason, session, to join the My Incredible Orbit Academy, whatever it may be, you'll find me at JacquieMcIntyre.com. See you next time. Bye.